Go ahead.
All right, good morning, everybody. I think we get started. We got probably 3 hours of content, at least, maybe more. And you could really do this in a whole week if you wanted to. In fact, there was a version of this class done at the Synod School last summer. Did you go to that class?
Yes.
Yeah. So they did it in essentially 4.5.
She wasn't as good as we are.
4.5 longer sessions. So there's certainly a lot of things to unpack that we won't get to. So a couple of things, if you're new to the class, just a couple of introductory statements. So first, the show is rated M, so some of the language is a bit salty, a little bit of locker room talk, and if you're watching the show at home or something like that, you'll just to be aware it's not a show for younger viewers. So anyone not familiar with who Ted Lasso is or what the show is about? Should we do a quick overview of that? I don't know. I'm trying to look and see if we have anyone who's brand new this week.
Yeah.
So we might do a quick overview. So Ted Lasso, let me let somebody from the audience, who's Ted Lasso? Who do you see him as?
Ted Lasso's a coach.
He's a coach, okay?
And an American.
He's an American from Kansas.
And he goes to Britain to coach soccer.
And he's hired in England to coach soccer, which he knows nothing about.
No, that's football.
That's football.
Football.
Right.
English football.
And then he brings his own personal baggage with him.
And he's in the middle of a messy divorce. His wife is leaving him, right? And so he's got a child back home in Kansas as well. So he's missing his family and going through some difficult transitions in his own life.
So he's relatable, and yet he's a really powerful leader. And how the show blends those two is what brings it to this setting in church, right? What does a mainstream media presentation have to say about the way we understand faith?
Yeah, so I'm trying to recapitulate or restate everything you said. So about his leadership style and what does a mainstream Hollywood polished product have to say about faith and about living out your beliefs and values.
Yeah. God works in mysterious ways. I'm on the Mayo Clinic newsletter online. Friday or even yesterday maybe, this came over. Health tips on forgiveness. And I'm not going to read it to you. I'm going to pass these around, but it's fascinating, the scientific information we have about what forgiveness does for us. And the fact that it's difficult. One of the things that just struck me, I couldn't believe it was in here, because planning revenge activates the brain's pleasure centers. That is so weird. You'll have to make a considerable effort to forgive. Never thought about that. But anyway, I will pass this around. That's what it's all about.
I was saying that motivates
wait a minute.
lot of...
Sarah, stand up and show them your...
Oh.
Yes.
This is who I'll be voting for this year.
Lasso and Kent, 24. So we've got 3 themes today we're going to talk about. We're going to kind of close out our discussion of forgiveness with a couple more clips of forgiveness. We'll talk about the prodigal son, because there's a lot of father-son relationships in the show, and what does that look like in terms of thinking about the prodigal son. And then we'll talk about, to close out, kind of the idea of belief and faith, and what is Ted's religion? Does he have a religion? What does that lead us to think about our own ideas of what belief and faith are all about? So we're going to finish up, we'll hopefully make sure we have time for all of those things. So I'm going to kind of move somewhat fast through the forgiveness section here, but this first part is about kind of closing out our section about forgiveness. So thinking about how difficult it can be to confront someone who's done wrong against you, especially in our Midwestern tradition of Midwest nice, and Rob's sermon this morning about not necessarily being called to be nice, but thinking about what the courage it takes to confront a situation where you've been someone has wronged you or is doing the wrong thing, and thinking about whether it's harder to be the person doing the confronting or being the person who's being confronted with a concern. And then I guess we also had an example this morning too about who Jesus confronted. When did he confront challenges or confront things that were being done that were wrong? And thinking about the example this morning from when he went to the temple and drove them out from the exploitation and things they were doing in the temple that were not fit to be there, and what did it cost him? So there certainly were people that did not find those actions favorable and certainly caused a lot of challenges for him as well in his ministry. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple of clips here. So those are kind of things to start thinking about a little bit. What does it mean to confront? What's that courage it needed to confront? And examples from the Bible. When did Jesus confront and how did he respond when confronted with things? So the first clip here, so there's a person named Higgins who works in management for the team. He's been part of this scheme. So the original scheme that the new owner of the team had was to punish her ex-husband by making the team terrible, making them lose, making them become the worst team, and punish her ex-husband who really loved the team. So she hired this coach who knew nothing about coaching football, and then tried to really do her best to undermine and see the team crash and burn and to get back at her ex-husband. So Higgins works for Rebecca, but he really doesn't like the idea of undermining this new coach. He doesn't like the idea of destroying the team on purpose, and he finds it really unethical and difficult. So we'll watch a little clip here. Okay, so in that example, they were both the confronter and the confrontee in a way, right? So Higgins was also complicit in Rebecca's ex-husband's adulterous episodes where those things were occurring, and Higgins knew about it but didn't share them with Rebecca. So they were both, in some ways, the confronter and the confrontee. Okay, here's another example. So Ted has apologized to the team about he had a panic attack and left the game and told them all it was food poisoning. It wasn't actually food poisoning. It was later revealed that it was a panic attack. He apologized to the team for not telling them the truth, and now they're preparing for a game. The other coaches decide that since he's kind of broken the ice, that they have the opportunity to share some things that they want to ask for forgiveness as well.
So you all fancy not drinking tea, huh?
I don't know how to tell you.
So Ted's confession opens the door for others to share things that they've been carrying around as well. Okay, so two more quick things, and I want to make sure we have some time for additional topics. But so Higgins does quit his job, as we saw before, in protest. And after several tries to find the courage, Rebecca decides she's going to go confront Higgins and tell him about what her thoughts are on the situation. So it takes a number of tries, but we'll see her final attempt here. Okay, and she referenced an apology she made to Ted, so it's a little bit out of order, but we're going to show that one finally. So Rebecca's been undermining him continuously with his photos, the not preparing him properly, undermining all his work, and so this is her finally working up the courage to approach Ted about what she's been doing. All right, so we got 3.5 minutes for this topic. Before we move on to the next one, but I wanted to chat about a couple of questions. So the courage to confront, the courage to forgive. How did it change those relationships in that situation? What did it do to those relationships? And then how do these examples change your thinking about confession and forgiveness? And if you have any biblical ideas, where do we see Jesus involved in forgiveness and confronting? So I got the mic movable so we can chat a little bit.
I guess I can start. I mean, I think it's really hard for people to want to rock a boat. You know, like sometimes if you're in a pattern with somebody, and even if that pattern is not working for you, or you realize something is wrong with the way you've been doing it, or the other person has been doing it, it's hard to sometimes say, hey, this is what I'm, unhappy about, or what I'm calling somebody out about. So I think it's hard, especially maybe for Midwesterners or people of certain personalities to do that. But I think oftentimes once we do, then we see this opportunity to grow in that relationship together. And what was interesting to me was the way that the different people who were asked for forgiveness responded. People respond, I think, positively more often than we think. So that was something that struck me. I don't know. And I can think of a variety of different biblical examples of forgiveness or lack of forgiveness, both in the Old Testament and New Testament. But sometimes it takes people years. Like Esau and, like others in the Bible who may have hung on to resentment for a long time, but then finally were able to let go of it, and how it probably helped a lot.
Another comment. I think when I think about my own life, one of the things I think about is the different bosses I've had in my life. So this is also a boss-employee relationship too. And I think one of the best bosses I ever had was one who told the truth, even though it was sometimes difficult, and it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. That wasn't very good, or we need to do this better. And hard to hear, but that's the honesty and the truth allows you to grow and work together. And then also when that person said, "Hey, you did a great job," it wasn't just like brushing you off like, "Oh, I did another great job." It was like she really meant it in that case too. One or two other comments? Can you come up here if you don't mind? It's not going to stretch that far.
I was scared when you said something about your past.
So you're the one with the squeaky chair back there?
Yeah, kiss me.
I'll have to forgive her for that.
You're forgiven.
I don't care. No. We had somebody this morning in worship asking for our forgiveness. I thought that was huge. And I really, really appreciate that person asking for our forgiveness and explaining. So that was all I had to say.
Yeah, and that was a very good example of that, but how forgiveness reopens relationships. That when you're open and when you're vulnerable, all of a sudden that relationship cements again.
The biggest part about that is it takes courage to admit you're wrong. There's way too many people that don't have any ability to look at the courage that they need to admit that they're wrong.
And Rebecca really had trouble with that.
Yeah, and I can sit throughout my lifetime, and it's been a long one, where I've respected people that fessed up. We had a saying in real estate: when you mess up, fess up. Because people don't get mad at you when you fess up. They get mad at you when you mess up, and then you cover it up, and you don't want to admit it.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at that as an unrespectful person that can't admit it.
The lack of respect that goes along with the failure to be able to admit when you're wrong. And we have one more comment, then we'll have to move on to our next topic. But
one of the things that I thought both with this and also this morning is that it's just not asking forgiveness, but it's saying where I'm coming from and what I saw. And I think once we understand the history behind things, then there's an understanding that can develop about what happened. And forgiving that person for doing it to you, it's not so much for me saying, okay, I forgive you. It's more, I get it now. And I get where you're coming from, and I understand that. And I think that that's really, really important in a relationship.
okay, we're going to move on to our next theme. I just wanted to leave you with one other thought, and that is, in this show, Rebecca forgives Rupert, but his behavior continues. So she sees him with a new wife, but also continuing to have affairs on his new wife. And so thinking about that also happens, where forgiveness it doesn't necessarily resolve the behavior, but it did change Rebecca's experience of that behavior, right? She no longer carried the same baggage with her, and she didn't carry that pain with her that she had held so tightly for such a long time. And one of the best kind of descriptors of forgiveness I've heard was, it is letting go of the hope that the past can be different. And so for her, even though Rupert doesn't become this saint after she forgives him and kind of stops undermining him, he doesn't change his behavior, but she doesn't carry it with her anymore. It doesn't eat her up inside anymore. So you see that. It's another thing to kind of ponder if you watch other parts of the show. Okay, we're going to move on to the next theme here.
When we were putting this together, we were trying to find, there are many themes we're not going to get to, but one of them was the prodigal son. And there's really two prodigal sons that are obvious in the series. The first one is Jamie Tart, who begins as the alpha male star of the team. And he, because of that and other factors, gets transferred to the opposing team where he is humiliated at a TV show in front of a national audience. He loses all his credibility. He hits the pits. He can't find a job. He asks to come back to Richmond, and they reluctantly, some of them, welcome him back. The other one is Nate, and I love Nate and his complex story. He began as the kit boy. You remember seeing the first scene as he runs across the field and he's worried about the new boss, this insecure man. And Ted instills in him confidence. It becomes his mentor, really, as well as others on the team, where they find out he's really a soccer genius and comes into his own and then becomes very arrogant. And power takes over his personality. And he claims he is offended by the team. He goes to the opposing team. And through circumstances there we won't go into too much, but he finds that that's really not him. And so he quits there and eventually does come back to his home, his family home, where he has issues with his father, and also back to the team. And so that's the two clips you'll see here. The next scene, the team actually had come to Nate, some of the team members, and asked him if he could come back. And Nate says, well, have you talked to Ted? And this is kind of after that. And he's not fully back to the team yet. Do you understand the rest of it? Comments?
Life's so easy when you can fast forward and get to the good parts. But I'm just giving my disillusionment, right? This is my problem with Hollywood, that of course that's the way it's supposed to be. I understand that that's, that's our goal every day, and yet the reality is not the same.
I don't need the mic.
Speak up.
I think a lot of this happens and we don't see it because we're not present. We're not there at that moment. But stuff around us is occurring just like that we don't see.
You mean types of forgiveness between people?
I think a lot of people are afraid to do it because they've never seen it done. And I'm just thinking, this is a real ministry that we could have, even just showing this, seeing people seeing that it's possible.
I mean, forgiveness part.
Yeah, well, the forgiveness and just the acknowledging of what we've done wrong and letting go of things. I think there's not a lot of modeling for that in our society anymore.
Maybe that was one reason that the series was so popular. We were seeing a part of ourselves we don't see often.
No.
This last set is, the question is, does Ted have a religion? And so we're going to look at, believe was his byword. You remember the very first session, he and Keeley had trouble getting it straight over the door. And that becomes their go-to for the team as they get ready for games and so forth. During the season, Nate takes the sign down and tears it in half. And we will see part of the repercussions of that. And then we'll talk about what we think Ted's religion might be. I would say it's hope. And I think he articulates that, which is a good message for us too.
Okay, so this context for this clip, they're doing a critical game for the team. So if they lose in the English system, they have kind of multiple levels of leagues. And the top league, of course, has the most money and the most fans. And then as you work your way up and down, it's kind of like the minor league system in the U.S., except whole teams can move up and down. So they're on the kind of the brink of being moved to a lower league if they lose a game. And most people think their team is going to lose badly because they don't have the players, they don't have the preparation, that kind of thing. And this is before kind of Nate's fallout with Ted. All right, the next one, they're in the locker room preparing for a game. Ted needs to try to convince the team they have a chance to succeed. He's giving a pep talk before the game. And wondering again, does it kind of illustrate Ted's approach to the world and to life? Okay, we're going to show one more. We show this one, or we skip this one?
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is, we're going to show one more here, or actually two more short clips. The team just finished a difficult game. They had a really lot of heartbreak in the game. Their best player on the team has left, retired from the sport, so they're disappointed. They wonder, what does it mean to believe? Can they still believe? Do they still have hope as a team? Okay, so one last clip. This is from, I won't give anything away, but it's from the last episode of the series. If they win this game, they have a chance to move up to the next league, which would be a really big success for them. But it's halftime, and they just blew a lead with a pretty serious mistake. And Ted has decided, and you probably know this by now, but he's decided he's going to go back to Kansas to be with his own son at the end of the season. So it's his last game as coach. So they're also kind of saying goodbye to Ted as well. And so he gives a pep talk at halftime here to talk more about what he means by what belief means to him. All right, so we have just a couple minutes. I know some of the classes are wrapping up because I see kids wandering in the hallway. So what does it mean? What does belief mean? How does it make you think about faith differently, perhaps maybe you did, and thinking about sometimes when Jesus talked about belief and faith, thinking about the times where he talks about the mustard seed, where he talks about what it means to believe in him. So thinking about how does that get you to reflect on belief or faith, and what does it mean, or how does it change the way you think about that, and what does it maybe mean to Ted? So we have time for a couple minutes of questions or comments, and then we can wrap it up.
I think to Ted, belief is believing in each other. He keeps saying that, and I think as Christians, that's a tenet of our faith too. It's just being with each other and believing in each other, believing in God certainly, but also just that God can redeem people and work through people. So.
Okay, other comments?
No, I would add that I think Ted's religion is hope, in hope of what's to come, and he's very optimistic about how that would be. And I think that applies to our hope. His is a better world, or making the best out of each person. Ours is hope in the promise of Christ. And so they're very similar in what we show our allegiance to. The one other thing I noticed this time that I never noticed before, it reminded me when Ted and Nate exchanged the eye contact. I've always thought there was that moment when Peter realizes he has failed Jesus for the third time, that they make that connection across that courtyard with that same kind of forgiveness in Christ's eyes for Peter. And it just struck me today. I'd never noticed that before from that piece.
Yes. I'm not going to bring the mic because that's not going to reach. Go ahead.
What the mind can believe and conceive, it can achieve. Simple.
What the mind believes, then can be achieved. So starting with that idea of if you can't visualize it or see it or believe it, then how can you live it out?
There was a great story in Saturday's Press Citizen on the sports page. It was about Gabby, and her shooting hadn't been so consistent. And her coaches kept teaching her to see it, to visualize it. She said, well, I never bought into that stuff. But in the last few games, she decided to try it. Look what's going on. So what we visualize, if we visualize believing in Jesus Christ,
we can achieve that.
Yeah, I think the one thing that always made me nervous watching the show was that Ted would be revealed as being like shallow or not living out what he says. But time and time again, he's given the chance to kind of back up his words with his actions, and he does. So that's another part of it too. It's for me, that's one of the interesting things about the show is it's not just he says these things, but he lives them out too. So he eats the hot food that's would embarrass the owner of the restaurant if he didn't do it. He forgives Nate. He brings him back to the team. So it's not just going around being nice or saying nice things. He's living these things out too. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. I think we had a couple closing comments. So, of course, it's a fictional show with some things that are a bit fantastical, perhaps. Although we're watching the Sunderland show on Netflix now as well, so that's kind of a real life version of what that show might be. So what are the other themes, either from the clips you've seen or from if you've watched the show yourself, that you think are interesting or get you to think about your own life differently? And then if there's anything that's caused you to reflect on forgiveness, confession, a prodigal son, being a prodigal son or being a parent to a prodigal child, belief or faith or anything else that you want to share before we wrap up, anything else that you wanted to share?
Just
the power of a positive attitude and just having that faith, carrying it forward. I don't know, he comes up with some pretty simple expressions. Be like a goldfish. They have a 10-second memory. Something bad happens. Forget about it. Move on. Keep moving on to something positive. I don't know. There's a lot of small pieces like that throughout the show.
Be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah.
Being curious and not judgmental is another big one a way he approaches life, and especially those being in a different country with different customs and being fans of tea. He keeps trying tea, even though he never grows a taste for it. He accepts that it's something different. Anything else? Yeah, someone else?
Just a reminder, next week here, Learning Academy will be doing the Rembrandt art, Linton art, with Shauna Stewart. And I would encourage you all to come back. I got a real appreciation for that with our conference in Montreat, and I think Shauna will do an excellent job. So please come back next week, and even if you aren't art nerds, it'll be, I think, fascinating.
We're not, no biscuits. Next week.
That's true.
All right, well, is there somebody who'd like to close this in prayer? Okay, let's pray together. Gracious God, thank you for the ability of writers and actors and producers to bring to light things that help us reflect on your world and our lives in new and different ways. Let's go forth taking with us that spirit of forgiveness and willingness to have the courage to confront when it's needed and to forgive others and to bring those back into the fold who have maybe wandered away, and to approach our faith and live it out in ways that reflect your love for the world and your love for us. In your name we pray, amen.